Bonjour. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for being here today. I wish to begin by acknowledging that we are situated on the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. I'm Filomena Tassi, Member of Parliament for Hamilton, West Ancaster, Dundas, as well as Canada's Minister of Labour. I'm proud to be here with you today for this very important announcement. And I'm thrilled to welcome our incredible Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, to Hamilton, our ambitious city. We've been very fortunate to welcome him here many times since he's become the leader of the Liberal Party. It's wonderful, Prime Minister, to have you back in the hometown of Hamilton. I'm so delighted as well to welcome Minister of Families, Children and Social Development, Ahmed Hussen. Ahmed is no stranger to Hamilton. He speaks often of his time in Hamilton as a youth and a student. Ahmed has been completely committed to offering Canadians a safe, stable and well-maintained place to call home. In fact, the last time Minister Hussen was in town virtually, he announced a historic investment of $145 million in City Housing Hamilton to repair 6,290 affordable housing units across 66 multi-family buildings in the city over the next 9 years. In order for any city or community to prosper, residents need access to safe and affordable housing. The pandemic has worsened many of the hardships already faced by Canadians experiencing housing insecurity or homelessness. Hamilton is no exception. Like other cities, we know that rents have gone up and housing prices have risen. I've seen firsthand many Hamiltonians who are struggling to find a safe and affordable place to call home. Housing has always been my top priority and a top priority for our government. Indeed, since 2015, our government has stepped up to help make over 1 million Canadians find safe and affordable homes. And we will continue to do what it takes to grow the middle class, build back stronger communities, and make life more affordable for Canadians. We have invested millions of dollars in affordable housing projects led by organizations like the YWCA and Indwell. I have been working on this in Hamilton with the assistance of my local caucus colleagues. We've held 3 symposia, 1 in 2018 and 2 in 2020, to get input from Hamilton stakeholders and to share information on how to access funding dollars. We held stakeholder engagement meetings hosted by the Good Shepherd with officials from CMHC, as well as the Parliamentary Secretary to Minister Justin, Adam Vaughan. We have had great numbers of advocates here and stakeholders in Hamilton who work tirelessly to ensure that everyone in Hamilton has a safe and secure place to call home. I am incredibly proud of the advocacy that takes place right here in Hamilton. And I know that when Parliamentary Secretary Vaughan was here, he actually gave a shout out to those advocates, saying it's one of the strongest advocacy communities across this country. I've also worked with the City of Hamilton officials and our Mayor to help develop affordable housing in our city. We will continue to do more to make sure that everyone has a safe, stable and well-maintained place to call home. Which brings me to today's announcement. To tell you more, I am honoured to have the opportunity to introduce to you Canada's Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, a real champion for affordable housing in Hamilton and across our great country. Over to you, Prime Minister.
Hello everyone, bonjour tout le monde. It is absolutely wonderful to be here today with Minister Hussain and Minister Tassi to talk about what we're doing on affordable housing for Canadians. Filomena, thank you for your words. Thank you for your leadership here in the community and across the country as our Minister of Labour. It is always wonderful to be back in Hamilton with you. And Ahmed, thank you for all your leadership as Minister of Housing, of Families and Communities. We've made a lot of announcements lately, whether it's been childcare or housing investments. This is all part of how we're making sure that Canadians are properly supported. Also, really happy to see Jeff from Indwell here as well. Building a more resilient Canada starts by making sure everyone has a roof over their head. Because for too many people in this country, finding an affordable place to call home is still a challenge. We need to keep working to change that. And when we say we, I don't mean all, I mean all orders of government and all sectors. We all need to pull together to find solutions on supply across the housing spectrum. Look, I don't need to tell people in the GTHA why this matters, because I don't have to tell anyone here that buying a home is beyond the reach of too many families. That's why, whether it's helping first-time home buyers or building more affordable rental units, our government has made unprecedented investments in housing since 2015. And after the spike in housing prices across the country during the last year, we know there is more work to be done. Today, we're announcing funding to help build 328 homes across southern Ontario, including 95 units here in Hamilton. All of these projects will be built with passive housing design, which means they'll be extremely energy efficient and even more affordable for tenants. My friends, that's exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need more of. Quand vient le temps de créer plus de logements abordables, on continue d'être en mode solution. Dans les derniers mois, les ministres Freeland et Hussain ont rassemblé nos partenaires provinciaux, municipaux et autochtones, ainsi que des leaders des autres secteurs pour agir et créer plus d'options de logement. Je peux vous dire que le travail se poursuit et que cet enjeu est en haut de notre liste de priorités. As you know, last December, we announced $10.8 million to support the creation of 45 new affordable homes here in Hamilton through the Rapid Housing Initiative. We will have good news to share very shortly for the second phase of the initiative, and we will continue to work extremely hard to make sure that no one gets left behind. When it comes to housing, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. That's why we're always working on a range of different ways to tackle this issue with a range of different partners. I have to say that Indwell has been an extraordinary, innovative partner in creating solutions that will last not just for a few years, but for decades, as people get the stability and the strength they need to contribute fully to their communities and build a better life. That vision is one that we are always happy to partnership, and I really want to thank Indwell. And while we're here, I also want to thank the incredible workers who actually make this a reality. I know that CLAC and Labour have been a really important part of this, but the hard work done to build a stronger Canada and better opportunities for everyone that all of you do every day is what allows us to be here together and making these great announcements. Because making housing more accessible and more affordable is about real positive outcomes for more people. For the middle-class families who are being priced out of their hometowns. For women and children who need a safe place to go. For people experiencing chronic homelessness. For workers who want to apply for a job in a big city but worry about being able to afford rent. This is who these initiatives and these investments are about. Of course, helping people build a better life for themselves doesn't just mean making sure everyone has a home. It also means making sure our communities are more connected. And for that, we need efficient and modern public transit systems. Recently, we announced that the federal government will contribute up to $1.7 billion to the Hamilton Light Rail Transit Project. The new line will go from McMaster in the west through downtown all the way to Eastgate, Centennial Park and Stony Creek. This is good news for students, workers, and families who have more important things to do with their time than being stuck in traffic. And that's not all this will mean for community. After all, projects like this also cut pollution and create good construction jobs. Avec un transport collectif adapté aux besoins des gens et avec plus de logements abordables, on fait en sorte que nos communautés soient plus fortes. C'est vrai ici à Hamilton et c'est vrai partout ailleurs au pays. Alors qu'on rebâtit après cette pandémie, on va s'assurer que personne ne soit laissé pour compte. The announcement we're making today is part of the multi-layered approach we have to building a better Canada for everyone. The passive housing investments means we'll be responsible towards the environment and fighting climate change while at the same time lowering costs for people. Similarly, as we invest in public transit, we're getting people to and from work and home more efficiently and quickly, while at the same time fighting climate change. And while we do this, we rely on extraordinary good jobs in the construction industry that continue to contribute to building a better Canada and creating more opportunities for everyone to get good jobs and create a stronger future. But before I end, I'd also like to say a few words about the Canada Child Benefit. Today marks 5 years since we brought in this program. For millions of hardworking families who now have hundreds of dollars more every month for essentials like groceries or school supplies, the CCB has been a real game changer. Unlike the previous government sending checks to millionaires, we designed the CCB for families who actually need the help, and the results speak for themselves. In the last 5 years, we've helped lift nearly 435,000 kids out of poverty. Today, the maximum annual benefit is going up once again to keep pace with the rising cost of living. This is yet another example of programs some outstanding Brampton youth to talk about their concerns and their ideas for a better future. I know how hard this pandemic crisis has been for young people. Everything changed so suddenly. Seeing friends, going to school, finding a job, practicing sports, so many things were suspended. Young people made so many sacrifices. So I want you to know that our government continues to be here for you, to work with you to build a better future, to draw on your ideas, your dynamism, and your optimism for a better future. And today's announcement to create more affordable housing is certainly a part of that. Merci beaucoup, mes amis. Happy to pass the mic over to Ahmed Hussen now.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for that kind introduction. Bonjour à tous. And it's great to be back in Hamilton. I went to high school in Sir John A. Macdonald, and it's always a special treat to be back in my first community in Canada. It is also a pleasure to be here, of course, with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and our outstanding Minister of Labour and friend Filomena Tassi, who's a very strong advocate for families right here in Hamilton and across Canada, but particularly on the issue of affordable housing. We've had numerous conversations on the importance of continuing federal investments in housing in Hamilton. The COVID-19 pandemic has reminded us of the importance of home. As we've told Canadians to shelter in place to curb the spread of COVID-19, we've understood even more deeply the importance of home being a place of sanctuary and refuge during these challenging times. Mes collègues et moi avons parlé avec beaucoup de familles qui ont été touchées par cette crise, y compris celle de Hamilton, et elles nous ont fait part de leurs inquiétudes et des défis auxquels elles font face. We've spoken directly with so many families on the challenges that they face during this pandemic. As the Prime Minister said, we stepped up early and quickly to introduce new programs, but also to enhance existing programs like the Canada Child Benefit, to make sure that Canadians don't have to choose between paying the rent and putting food on the table. These measures have provided valuable relief to families, but also helped our economy. But we didn't stop there. Nous faisons un investissement sans précédent de l'histoire du Canada par un gouvernement fédéral pour mettre en place un système d'apprentissage et de garde de jeunes enfants. We're making an investment unlike any other that by any federal government in Canadian history to build a truly affordable, high-quality, accessible and inclusive early learning and childcare system across our country. A system that will cut childcare fees in half by the end of next year and bring childcare fees down to an average of $10 within 5 years. And just this morning, we celebrated the 5th year anniversary of the CCB, the Canada Child Benefit, by once again announcing that this benefit will be increasing again to keep up with the cost of living. This, in addition to the $1,200 per child under the age of 6 that parents will receive this year to help them navigate the unique challenges brought on by the pandemic. We also know that in addition to supporting families, we have to make sure that we're keeping an eye on the issues of affordable housing and access to safe and accessible housing. The National Housing Strategy is helping us to do exactly that. It has grown from a $40 billion program to a $72.5 billion program. The Rapid Housing Initiative is an example of that, a $2.5 billion investment that is taking 4,700 success stories and converting it into 9,200 new permanent affordable housing units across the country. Cette initiative s'assure que personne ne tombe entre les mailles du filet. This initiative is helping to ensure that no one is left behind. And just a few months ago, we announced, as Minister Tassi said, $145.6 million in funding for the repair and regeneration of over 6,200 affordable housing units in Hamilton to ensure that they're energy efficient, accessible, and to lengthen their lifespan. And one of those units is in 95 Hess Street, a social housing building that I inhabited while I went to high school in Hamilton. This is making a big difference in the lives of Hamiltonians and will make sure that more Hamiltonians have a safe and affordable place to call home. And today's announcement by the Prime Minister is another piece of that puzzle. And with that, I want to turn it over to Jeff Niven from Indwell to provide a few remarks. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Minister Hussain, and thank you, Prime Minister Trudeau, for joining us today for this announcement and for your support. And Minister Tassi, thank you for your ongoing and consistent search for finding solutions for people's needing housing in Hamilton and across Canada. My colleagues at Indwell and I are honored that you're all here today. Especially over the last 2 years and even more over the past 2 months, it's become clear that it is important to us as Canadians that we affirm the dignity given to us by the Creator, dignity of housing. I live in this neighborhood. I live in Ward 3, and there's dozens of people, of my neighbors, who are sleeping under tarps in our neighborhood. And this is a solution to that. It's about affirming people's dignity, of all people. Yesterday marked 3 years from when we stood right here and we had a party. Who was here for that party? Some of you here? You're here. Woo-hoo! Yeah. And we purchased this site, and the first thing we did is we had a party to announce to our neighborhood that there was going to be change, that there was hope on the horizon. And here we are today, 3 years from that, with these buildings behind us. The dreams have come up as structures, and it was, as we gathered, we remembered that just a week earlier of that party, there was somebody that was found without vital signs, and it was too late for them, right over here. So we party, we dream of a brighter future. We can see today a brighter future, but we hold on to the need yet that we're addressing. By this time next year, this courtyard will be a central hub for these 3 buildings and home for over 110 people. People whose hopes for health, wellness, and belonging are being realized. This building to my right here, the former stables of the dairy, might be surprising, but it will be the first to open later this year, and it will welcome 13. It'll create homes for 13 Indigenous tenants and the new offices for Sacagawea nonprofit housing. Where's Melanie? Melanie over there, Melanie McNall. Thanks for your leadership on this. And as Melanie said today to me, this is what working out the truth of the Truth and Reconciliation looks like. And we're proud to partner together on not only this project, but on a commitment to work out the Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommendations. So we are thankful for you, and we're thankful for all of our partners that make this possible for truly deeply affordable housing and supports across southwestern Ontario. I'd like to thank our federal government as partners. Minister Hussain, when you come and you talk to us and say, what are the solutions? What do we need to do to partner to create real solutions to this? You listen, and we see that replicated, and we see the response in policy. So we thank you for listening to our community and creating solutions. And we're thankful for other levels of government and their contribution as well. And did you know that we have already raised over $3 million in private fundraising support as well for this? And I'll just call out Mary Dalton over there, who's the executive director of the Cowan Foundation, and they got almost $500,000 into this project in donations. So this is possible when we all come together and say, this is what's important. These are the values of our community, and this is how we live them out. And this is what's possible. We are thankful for the leadership of CMHC and their vision, the vision that by 2030 that everyone in Canada has a home that they can afford and that meets their needs. That's powerful, isn't it? We thank Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation for this vision, and we're thankful to contribute and partner in it. And we will not settle, Prime Minister, until everyone has a home that they can afford and that meets their needs. And that's a commitment from us as the community as well. Working together makes these things happen. We see the buildings today. A year from now, we'll welcome you back, and we'll welcome you back, Prime Minister, to a ribbon cutting, and there will be, this space will be animated with stories, with lives, with hope, with new transformation of lives, and I'm just so delighted about that piece. That's why we're here today, isn't it? Thank you for joining us. And I'd like to open up questions. Prime Minister, if you would take the podium.
Thank you. We'll now go to questions from media. Just as a reminder, it's one question, one follow-up.
Prime Minister Trudeau, my name is Tevia Moore. I work for the Hamilton Spectator. I have a question for you that deals with what Hamilton is seeing, and I'm sure other cities across the country. And that's rent evictions that are putting people on the street. And I think your government has tried to address this through offshore investors, through the tax that will try and dissuade them from sitting on properties and leaving them vacant. However, I think a lot of people would agree that a number of these financialized landlords are right here in Canada, and I think that tool would not apply to them. So what are you doing to try and prevent this problem, really, which is a huge attrition in the private market, to prevent people from getting pushed out of their homes?
Well, I think first of all, we recognize not just in Hamilton, but right across the country, housing is a huge challenge. There is a spike in prices that we've seen associated with the pandemic, but not only because of the pandemic. There are challenges around adequacy of supply. There are challenges around rising costs that are pricing many young people who would want to get into the housing market and start equity out of the market, and delaying them by a few years, which will have impacts over the course of their lives. This is something we recognized back in 2015, and we decided in a very deliberate decision that it was time for the federal government to get back into the business of housing in this country. The previous government had taken Canada out of the business of housing, left it in the hands of municipalities and the provinces. but we needed the federal government to come back in to make up for lost time. And we did that in a big way with the National Housing Strategy announced in 2017, with a number of different initiatives, because as you point out, there are many different angles and aspects to the housing crisis. The first-time home buyers incentive makes sure that for young couples getting into the housing market, they can get a break on their mortgages so that they can actually afford the down payment and the payments to get in earlier into the housing market when we know prices are going up so significantly. Recent initiatives like the Rapid Housing Initiative that actually is delivering money quickly to municipalities to build more solutions. Initiatives like the Rental Construction Initiative that we leaned on yesterday in a big announcement in Brampton to create more and more affordable rental units right on public transit. And today we're talking about the Affordable Housing Innovation Fund, which we're working with Indwell and other partners across the country to find innovative solutions for low-cost housing and availability, deep affordability for people. Yes, there are other measures we've brought in as well, including a proposed tax on non-resident, non-occupying, non-Canadian owners of properties. But all these different things need to come together. And yes, the federal government can be there to give direct supports like the portable housing benefit for families, which we're delivering. But at the same time, we need to have provincial partners, we need to have municipal partners, all orders of governments, and a great example of Indigenous partnership as well for this building. Rents and evictions are actually monitored and controlled by provincial legislation, not federal legislation, but we will continue to be there as investors, as partners, as direct supporters of Canadians who need to get better, secure housing. Because as much as housing is a problem, it's not just a problem, it's also a solution. And looking at that solution for so many other challenges we're facing is something this government remains committed to.
Thanks, Prime Minister. I have a follow-up question which deals with a local issue. Your colleague, Minister McKenna, a little while ago told us about well, the big LRT announcement, which you've mentioned again today. However, there was a condition that were her words, as she suggested that affordable housing would have to come with this light rail line. We're hoping you could provide a little more clarity as to what that means. Who's going to provide that? How will that condition be made into a reality?
Well, I think one of the things we understand that with transit, we have an opportunity to build more livable cities and more housing units closer to accessible transit. We need to build transit, we need to build homes close to transit. And that is part of the entire vision of this government. To recognize that even as we fight climate change with better transit, even as we tackle poverty and chronic homelessness with more housing, even as we move forward to create good jobs in housing, in construction, even as we move forward on creating opportunity and prosperity for people to live closer to where they work, we have to work it all together. So we were very happy to partner with the City of Hamilton and get the province back on board for significant transit initiatives. But we're also going to keep working on housing because we know that making sure that people can live close to transit to get to and from work in affordable ways is also part of building a stronger Hamilton and a stronger Canada.
Kevin Winter, Hamilton Community News. So you're here today. Your Minister McKenna was here yesterday. When is the federal election going to be called?
The work that this government is doing, and quite frankly has done for the past 6 years, has been focused on delivering for Canadians. We launched the National Housing Strategy, which led to this back in 2017. We've continued to step up on a Canada Child benefit that 5 years ago was put into place and has had an impact on families all across the country with more money every month tax-free for the families who need it. We've moved forward on investments in public transit, and of course, we're announcing a lot this summer because over the last year and a half, we all spend a lot of time on Zoom, and it's nice to be here in person to talk about the work that we've done over the past year in setting this up, including with the historic budget 2021 that has laid out the kinds of investments that will ensure that we build back better, we build back greener, we build back fairer for everyone. These are the things we've been working on, and right now I'm very glad to be here with friends and partners to continue to talk about the difference we're making in Canadians' lives as we build back better.
You were at the mosque this morning, and in light of the attack against the Muslim mother and daughter, your government has been criticized for not doing enough to combat Islamophobia. How do you respond to that?
When we took office in 2015, we did so with a straightforward commitment to Canadians. The politics of division, the politics of singling out one community, all too often the Muslim community, to gain votes on, to gain political advantage on, as unfortunately we saw even in the lead up to the 2015 election. And we have worked since then on bringing Canadians together. A couple of years after that, we introduced Bill M103 in the House of Commons to recognize and condemn Islamophobia. You will remember that there was an unfortunate level of disagreement and debate over something as obvious as the need to condemn Islamophobia. And over the past years, the work that we've done as a government with partners in the community sector and indeed across the country, we've gotten to a place where Canadians all understand that we have to fight against Islamophobia, even as we stand against anti-Semitism, even as we stand against the troubling rise in anti-Asian racism, even if we stand against the systemic and perpetual anti-black racism that Canada still struggles with, and even as we continue to redouble and recommit ourselves every day to the hard work of reconciliation, particularly given the very difficult news coming out of Cowessess, out of Tecumloops, out of former residential schools across the country for so many Indigenous peoples and for so many Canadians to realize what our history is about. So what have we done over the past years to counter Islamophobia? We established an anti-racism secretariat that has a direct mandate on that. We've worked with our intelligence agencies and security officers to make sure that we're listing organizations like the Proud Boys and far-right extremists as being on Canada's terrorist list. We've continued to invest in community safety infrastructure for mosques, for synagogues, for churches, so they can install cameras that will keep them safer. We've actually moved forward recently on new legislation to strengthen our justice system, to be able to go after online extremism and counter online harms, including restoring Section 13 to the Human Rights Act. We have taken many steps, but I absolutely agree. A government alone cannot eradicate racism, cannot eliminate Islamophobia. I mean, there's much we have done and there's much more we will do, including hosting a national summit on Islamophobia this week. But it is on all Canadians to stand with vulnerable communities, to be better allies. When a kid from the LGBT community is being bullied, we need to show them we're there for them. When women are afraid of walking in the streets wearing their hijab, we have to show them that we stand with them against hate and intolerance. When a synagogue is vandalized, it's up to all of us, not just Jewish Canadians, to come out and stand against that kind of hatred. And yes, the horrible pandemic has created anxieties and stresses. I think about domestic violence, where we were telling people to stay home because you need to stay safe. What about those women for whom home is not a safe place? We cannot simply expect that government can pass a piece of legislation and do it all. I mean, yes, we have lots to do, we have done, and we will continue to. But we need every Canadian to be standing against hatred and intolerance. From calling out sexist language in the workplace, to pushing back against discrimination in our community, to standing with community members who are fearful because of their religion, because of the way they look. If we want to be the country I know we want to be, we all have to step up. We have to come together. And that is what we're working on as a government, and that is what we're working on as Canadians.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. I'm Matt Ingram of CHCH News. I'm wondering, in light of the attack in Ancaster, a number of people in the Muslim community are feeling unsafe. Tackling Islamophobia is certainly going to take time, so I'm wondering, are there some immediate concrete steps you can take today to make people feel safer in their own community?
Nobody in Canada should feel unsafe walking the streets, going about their business, regardless of what they're wearing or what their skin color is. That's not what Canada should be. Unfortunately, that is the lived reality for far too many Canadians. And in the Muslim community, the anxiety they're feeling just going out to the store, wearing a hijab, and being fearful is unacceptable in this country. So yes, as a government, we've convened a national summit on Islamophobia later this week, where we're going to talk about deliberate and measured steps that we can take. We've moved forward on countering online harms and giving more power to the justice system. We're working with police officers and agencies to ensure that we're both countering systemic racism within them, but also making sure they're connecting better with communities. There is much we need to do, and I know the National Council of Muslim Canadians have put forward a list of recommendations that we're going to be talking about later this week, and we're going to move forward on. But it is something that if you want to talk about ending racism in our communities, ending Islamophobia, ending the ignorance and the intolerance, yes, government has a big role to play, and we will always play it. But ordinary Canadians, from coast to coast to coast, need to step up and realize we are all part of the solution. We can all stand against systemic racism, unconscious bias, against intolerance. There is more we can do to be better allies to one another, because that's what Canada is supposed to be all about.
In regards to the reopening of the border, yesterday you said that you'll continue to work with the American government. What are they telling you, and are they explaining why there hasn't been a reciprocal arrangement for fully vaccinated Canadians to be allowed in? And is there a timeline? Do we know when we can anticipate fully vaccinated Canadians to be allowed back in the States?
I will remind you that vaccinated or unvaccinated Canadians have been allowed to go down to Florida over the entire course of this pandemic. The Americans have always had an asymmetrical arrangement with us, where even though we put in a barrier to tourists or non-essential travel from the U.S. and from the rest of the world as of last March, whether they're by land or by air, Canadians have, throughout the pandemic, been able to fly down to the States for tourism, for secondary residences, for whatever reasons they wanted. So the asymmetry in the relationship has always been there. But that hasn't prevented us from working very, very closely to align ourselves. And indeed, being able to continue the $2 billion worth of goods and merchandise that crosses our border every single day, and including during the height of the pandemic, required cooperation and alignment. But every country gets to set its own rules about how it will keep its citizens safe. Canada is proceeding in a responsible, gradual way. We have, throughout the pandemic, been very careful about the steps that we've taken. And we're going to proceed in a gradual way, allowing fully vaccinated Americans only to come into Canada as of the 9th of August. But we will still be monitoring, we will still be doing testing, we will still be demanding pre-arrival tests, because we are going to be cautious about it every step of the way, because we've sacrificed too much over the past year and a half to fall back into another wave or another surge now. And that's why, to everyone out there who is looking at our rising vaccination rates and saying, oh, it's great that everybody else is getting vaccinated, that means I won't have to, think again. We're going to continue to live with COVID-19 as a world over the coming years until we eradicate this. And that means there will continue to be cases here and there, including in Canada, in the coming months. And those cases will be primarily amongst people who didn't get vaccinated or didn't get their second dose of vaccination. Hospitalizations and severe consequences are still out there. We are not at a level where we can let down our guard. So please, if you haven't got your first dose yet, now is the time. If you haven't got your second dose, it's also the time to do that, because we all want to have a better fall. So please continue to get vaccinated. We're leading the world right now in percentage of people vaccinated. We're continuing to do that. Keep it up. We're not through this pandemic yet, but we're on the right track.
Hi, Prime Minister. Heather Butts with CTV National News. Canadian veterans are working to help get interpreters out of Afghanistan, and you mentioned yesterday that you'll be making an announcement on that very soon. But there are others who transform their lives, some with Canada's help, and are now in danger. For instance, the families of those who champion girls' education are now at increasing risk. So what is Canada doing to help these people?
First of all, Canadians stepped up in Afghanistan and continue to step up through humanitarian and development work after many years of stepping up on the military level. And we were assisted by Afghans who shared our vision and our view of a fairer, peaceful, better Afghanistan and better world. Many of those people have put their lives at risk to support Canadians. Many of them are now at great risk because of gains that the Taliban is making in Afghanistan. That is why we are working with partners on the ground. We are working with Canadian veterans. We are working with different organizations and with communities in Afghanistan to be able to provide safety and coming to Canada for many of them and their families. As I said, this is something that we take very seriously and that we are working diligently and aggressively on.
Thanks. I just want to go back to the vaccines. You mentioned briefly, Canada is getting over 7 million doses of vaccine this week, but the uptick of Canadians taking the vaccine has slowed over the past few weeks. We're hearing from pharmacists who are having to perhaps discard some of these vaccines, people not showing up for appointments, and again, sort of that uptick for first and second doses really slowing down. So are you worried at all that supply of the vaccine is now outpacing the demand, and are you worried about wasting these vaccines if the demand isn't there?
Canada has, from the very beginning, understood that vaccination is the way through this pandemic. That's why we signed more deals with more vaccine companies than just about any of our peer countries, why we secured potentially more doses per Canadian than for any other citizen in the world. And that is why, part of why, we have now passed the US in terms of fully vaccinated people, and in terms of people who have at least one dose, we are at the highest percentage in the world, or certainly among the G20. But that's not just because the government did all the right things in terms of booking vaccines, delivering vaccines, and getting them into people's arms. It's because Canadians also stepped up. Canadians knew that this is what we had to do to keep ourselves safe, to keep our communities safe, and to get our economy going again. Canadians stepped up and got vaccinated and are continuing to get vaccinated. And that's why I continue to encourage everyone to go get your second shot. Get your first shot if you haven't gotten it. Because we're going to want to have the best possible fall. That'll only happen if the largest possible number of us are vaccinated. And at the same time, we are stepping up around the world. We've donated millions of dollars and millions of vaccines that we weren't using to the rest of the world, and we will continue, because we don't get through this pandemic anywhere until we get through it everywhere.
Nicole Thompson, the Canadian Press. I wanted to ask you about sort of the lack of transparency coming from the U.S. about why they aren't following Canada's lead on allowing Canadians to cross the border by land rather than just by air. Do you think Canadians deserve more transparency from the U.S. in that regard?
I think every country should and does set its own border policies. We have been working with the United States to keep them informed, to make sure that as much as possible our choices are aligned. But you will have seen, everyone will have seen, that our countries took different approaches, certainly during the beginning of the pandemic. From March 2020, over a year and a half ago, we imposed a 2-week mandatory quarantine for anyone who came into Canada. We brought in mandatory testing. We ensured steps that the United States never quite took in their approach. They will follow their science, they will make their own decisions, and we will work with them to make sure that we're coordinating as best as possible. But Canada is not going to anymore dictate what the U.S. should be doing around its border policy than we would accept the U.S. to dictate to us around our border policy. As friends and neighbors, we will work together as best we can, but each of our respective governments' responsibility is to keep our citizens safe. And that is what's going to guide us every step of the way. And of course, that is what guides the American government as well.
And taking it back to the issue of Islamophobia, we've seen that numerous Muslim charities have written to you in recent weeks raising concerns about being unfairly singled out for Federal Revenue Agency audits and sanctions, which they say contributes to Islamophobia. Will you act on their concerns?
Absolutely. We are extremely concerned with these reports and are looking very closely at our processes. It is unacceptable that processes single out any particular communities. We do have important work to do to make sure that charitable organizations are following all the rules involved, and that is an ongoing process. But recognizing that systemic racism exists in all of our institutions, in all of our governments, and all of our organizations means listening to communities who point out barriers or discrimination that they're facing and pledging to work with them to solve these challenges.
Hi there, this is Bobby Hristova with CBC News. You're saying the government can't fight hate alone and ordinary people need to call out discrimination and support those who are afraid. A lot of people are already doing that, though. So how else can ordinary people like the ones here today help?
First of all, by having absolutely zero tolerance for anyone in any leadership position that plays up the politics of fear or division. Canadians massively rejected that in 2015, and we need to continue to remain vigilant that in various rhetoric and dog whistle politics and coded language, that we're calling out people who are encouraging Canadians to be divided as opposed to pulling together. Further, people can reach out to community groups, whether it's grassroots Muslim organizations or through the local mosques, to ask how you can help. Whether it's going to visit on open door days, or whether it's contributing to the community to make sure that Muslim Canadians see that it's not only up to Muslim Canadians to fight Islamophobia, but it's up to all of us to fight Islamophobia, hatred, intolerance in all its forms. Canada's not a country that happened by accident. It took people coming together to overcome their differences to build this country we live in now, and it won't continue without effort of us making conscious choices about who we elect, about how we engage with our neighbors, about what kind of discourse we hold with our friends within our workplaces. What we've seen from the rise in intolerance and polarization and populism around the world over these past years is it's on all of us to continue to be vigilant, to listen to each other, to get to know each other, and to work together to build a better future. And a government needs to lead on that. I mean, yes, it's up to ordinary Canadians to do their part, but the government needs to continue to do its part as well, which we have and we will continue to do because there's lots more to do.
And online activity by right-wing extremists in Canada actually rose last year. So what is the government's plan to deal with online hate beyond banning groups like the Proud Boys and then letting them continue to operate online?
I think the entire world is grappling with the reality of a digital social media universe that is extremely difficult to regulate, and quite frankly is undesirable that we fully regulate. It is important for our democracies, it is important for our countries that we have free exchange of ideas, free opportunities for people to express themselves. But we need to make sure we are continuing to stand strong against violence, against incitation to violence, about encouragements to hate, against hate speech itself, which are all against the law in this country. But how, as a society, we figure out how to navigate the importance of protecting people's fundamental rights, including the rights to freedom of speech, with at the same time making sure that the rights of a Muslim woman to walk down the street in the evening without feeling fear are also protected. And that involves, quite frankly, measures we've taken in the Christchurch call to action over the past few years, where Canada was one of the leaders in making sure that social media companies act quickly in situations of terrorism or extremism to take things down. But also that we're continuing to move forward on a Charter of Rights, in the Charter of Digital Rights. And we move in ways that will continue to defend our fundamental freedoms and freedom of speech, amongst other things, while at the same time we make sure we're keeping Canadians safe. And anyone who tells you there's an easy answer to that is trying to sell you something. It's hard work, and it's thoughtful work, and it requires all of us as individuals to weigh in, to be part of this discussion on how we build the kind of Canada we know we can have that protects everyone's fundamental rights and keeps everyone safe at the same time, in real life and in the virtual space. Merci, mes amis.